Good morning, everyone. If we could have everybody try and find a seat, we're going to open up these back doors and wheel in some more chairs. My name is Nate Olson. I'm the director of the 1 Million Cups program, and I'm so excited to be here. Last week I was on vacation. I heard it was standing room only, and it looks like we're having a repeat week. Today I am super excited. Our presenters are really interesting, really important in Kansas City. So I'm going to get straight into it. You guys are here to hear about these companies and hear about the founders and why they do what they do. But first, real quick, a little bit about 1 Million Cups. 1 Million Cups is a weekly educational program where we showcase startups all around the country. We target this program for second-tier cities, cities that have a foundation of entrepreneurial activity happening, but this kind of helps connect what's already happening and really play a community role in building relationships between entrepreneurs. This morning, this is happening in 10 cities across the country. If you'd like to know about the startups that are presenting today in those cities, you can go to 1millioncups.com and click on the city that you're interested in looking in. Couple housekeeping rules. Obviously, we have a lot of people packed in this morning, and for everyone standing against the wall, it's very easy to want to talk to your neighbor. We want to be very open, and we want you guys to talk about these startups, but not while they're presenting. So just be respectful to the presenters, and also if you could help pick up your coffee cups and throw them away. We'd really appreciate that. It makes cleanup much easier. So let's get into our first presenter. Our first presenter is Barnett Hellsberg. How many of you recognize the Hellsberg name? Right. Barnett is an amazing man, an amazing mentor, and I would say Kansas City legend. And I've been really privileged to get to know him first as a student at the Hellsberg School of Management at Rockhurst University. And then I've gotten to know him in a professional sense working with him at the Kauffman Foundation. And he has started a startup. So I want to invite up Barnett Hellsberg and Jonathan Lee, who are going to be presenting their startup, Phony Invoices. Give them a big round of applause.
Thank you. You're welcome. In 2010, the giant publisher Condé Nast got an email, a single email from Texas with a billing and information that the supplier had changed their ACH, their bank number. They paid a $7.9 million phony bill to Quadgraph because they thought it was the printer they'd used called Quad Graphics. Time marches on, or backwards. 2 years prior, Best Buy got a $900,000 bill from one of their suppliers. It was a phony bill. They paid $900,000. Nothing was shipped. At Hellsberg Diamonds, before it was merged with Berkshire Hathaway in 1995, I was getting bills authorized by managers. And I got one that said, here was the check ready to sign. White pages. I called the manager, what is this? Well, I thought it was a phone book. Well, from that experience, and then researching the phony bills that had been paid, and the post office claims it's millions or billions, you've all gotten those yellow page bills and others. The idea came up that we would start a company called phonyinvoices.com and test payables departments in companies. And I went to Dave Cacioppo, who I had known many years as a successful digital marketing leader, and he'd been a member of the Hellsberg Entrepreneurial Mentoring Program, and we started up Phony Invoices. And I want to introduce Jonathan Lee, our Vice President of Sales at Phony Invoices.
Thanks, Barnett. I'm not nearly as famous as Barnett, but if you get to speak to him about Phony Invoices, he's actually very passionate about putting these scammers out of business. And so We're gonna, one MC runs a tight shift. It's like Shark Tank on steroids. So we're gonna dive right into this. You don't need to know any more about who I am. But just to make sure we're all on the same page, when we talk about invoice fraud, we just actually, incidentally, we just came back from the Global Fraud Conference in Las Vegas, of all places, right? Did you even know there was a conference called the Global Fraud Conference? Right. So we discovered this, through the School of Hard Knocks. The world of fraud is huge. There are very creative ways of criminal activity. We are targeting invoice fraud. It's a very focused sliver of fraud, and we're gonna, for what we see it is stuff that comes in the mail, through fax, through email, that looks like this. The two most common are what we see are fake yellow page scams and fake domain name registry scams. I don't know if you've seen this. I'm sure you have. Many of you business owners get these. They look like invoices, but they're not. And oftentimes, if you could go to the next one, the anatomy of one, they're very generic, they're very simple. There's enough compelling information. So there could be your accounts payable contact could be on there. Obviously, your address, your phone number is going to be on there. If it's a domain name registry scam, they're going to say, hey, your domain name registry is coming up. It's probably accurate information. All of that's public knowledge. The thing is, while they look like, especially the yellow pages, because that walking fingers thing is actually not trademarked, so anyone can use it. They look like invoices, but oftentimes in the very fine print, they will say, this is not an invoice, this is not a bill, this is a solicitation. The point being, if you are in the course of business, in the course of doing business at the speed of business, being overworked, being understaffed, a lot of times these invoices, they go through under the radar. And the whole point is they want to get into your master list, your master vendor list. Once they're in there, they can invoice at will, every month, every quarter, every year, because by then, from all accounting purposes, that is a verified vendor. And so we have, this is our focus. Usually it's smaller dollar amounts, but it can go all the way up to, like Barnett was saying, $7.9 million, $900,000, that whole spectrum of invoices that are fake. Either you're never going to get a service from them, you're never going to get a product for them, or that service and product is totally overvalued. They're selling you something that you do not need to be paying for. These are the other common types. So Yellow Pages, domain name registry, there's PayPal scams, patent, trademark. Oftentimes when you file for a patent or file for a trademark, that's public knowledge. You will get an invoice that says, hey, for $1,500, we're going to help you do this correctly, especially on an international level. They throw things out like that, and you have a patent that you really want to get done. You think, oh, I want to do this right. I'm going to pay this fee. There's charity, Department of Labor, relevant services. Just recently, we tested a local bank. Relevant services, we figured, well, this bank probably uses a courier service. So we devised our own fake invoice, sent in a courier service, and they paid us. Office supplies, usually when we're in a room full of small business owners, office supplies scams, everyone groans because everyone's fallen for that. Everyone's ordered toner cartridges that they didn't really need. Someone signed for it and they had to pay for it. So the question remains, even with the disclaimers, even with the this is not a bill, are these getting paid? And there must be a resounding yes, because just before we get into some of the statistics, if we take a step back and we look at how these scams live, and we've done research, when scammers go into an area, they blanket the entire area. I mean, we have seen scams almost with a life of their own hit an entire region, an entire city. And it begs the question, well, someone, for any of you that have done direct mail campaigns, it's not cheap. Someone's paying for the printing, someone's paying for the postage, and that's not chump change. We encourage people, when you get these fake invoices, call the number that's on there. Sometimes you'll get a voicemail, sometimes you'll get a recording. Other times you will get a fully staffed call center. I mean, it is astounding at the lengths of what these scammers do to make themselves look legitimate. If you do not pay, sometimes 30, 60, 90 days later, you will get a call. Oftentimes a reminder call, hey, you got to pay this, hey, you got to renew this fee. If not, we're going to send you to collections. I mean, it's they judge themselves how much they want to press, but it's interesting to see that. So there's a retired FBI, Jeff Lanza, he's right here in Kansas City, he's on our board. He says he's convinced that scammers are not foolish. They would not be doing this unless they were making some tremendous, significant profit. And so when you add up postage, you add up the call center, they set up the collections agency, the printing for even just a city the size of Kansas City, it's considerable. And so they're not going to do it for tiny margins, they're going to do it for a lot. So what kind of profit, fake profit, or real fake profit, whatever you want to call it, are we seeing? Well, the Federal Trade Commission released this. There was a group that ran a Yellow Pages scam. It was something for like $500 a hit. So it wasn't for the Condé Nast $7.9 million. It was small level. They want to get under the radar, small, medium-sized businesses, even enterprise. 4 guys over the course of 4 years deposited $425 million. I mean, so this is not, I mean, I know, whoever whistled, that's right. Barnett always jokes, if Phony Invoices doesn't take off, we can always do plan B, because now we know how to do scams, right? I don't think he's serious. But the point being, there's big money, and as long as there's money being made, these scams are going to continue. Another statistics that the Federal Trade Commission released was small businesses and nonprofits. So we're talking about churches and 501c3 groups. They get scammed. They estimated $200 million worth of office supplies every single year. And so this is big bucks. This is big money. Next slide. What can we do? Who are you going to call? Call us. One of the first things we do is we call it a vendor check. So you give us your master vendor list. We compare it against our database of known scams, and we look to see what gets red flagged. We have algorithms that rank the returns. Just color-coded: red, don't pay these. They are known scammers. Orange, we would say, hey, take a double look, take a double check. You might want to make sure and verify you want to pay these. And then, of course, green, as far as we're concerned, pay these. We also do a controls test. This is something that Barnett alluded to. This is the most interesting, or very interesting part of a business. If you hire us, we will send you fake invoices. Not so that we can get payment, but we're trying to test your accounting control apparatus. We want to see how your organization responds to fraud. So we send out these fake invoices usually for a finite time period that we predetermined, we agree upon. And over the course of 2 or 3 or 4 months, we'll escalate our focus and severity in terms of the types of invoice that we're sending you. And we just want to see, how does your organization, do you guys pay these invoices? God forbid no, but yes, see, a lot of times they do. Do these invoices get thrown in the trash? Do they get bounced around from department to department until someone pays them? Do they reach the CFO's desk? This is all interesting information. If you are the VP of Finance, or if you are the CFO or the compliance person, you want to know. Because a lot of times these organizations, they'll spend good money on setting up really good and airtight accounting controls, but there's this human element. You might have the best controls in the world, but when it comes down to the nitty-gritty of doing business, you have a person doing that business, and that person can be on their game or off their game. And so we're there to kind of just bring a little bit of oversight, a little bit of quality control in terms of a company's own accounts payable. We do this directly with a customer, so direct sales, but we are also very open to establishing strategic partnerships with CPA firms, auditors, consultants, anyone that thinks they might know a customer that could use either of these services. We're very interested in pursuing that opportunity. But most recently, and just because it's a room full of entrepreneurs, I think you'll all appreciate this. In the beginning of your startup, there's a lot of pivoting that happens, right? There's a lot of redefining the product, redefining the service. So we just went through a pretty large one. We're going to keep our direct sales tools, of course, but we're very excited about this. Over the course of the last 6 to 8 months, as we've carried out business, we've realized one of our greatest assets is actually this data that we've been collecting. It is, and as we survey the land of scams, we realize, by default of doing business, we actually have arrived at a place where we have the most robust, comprehensive scam database there is on the market right now. And it's continually being sourced, it's continually being fresh. And so we developed a data-driven API that we are hoping and wanting for others to connect with. So the easiest thing, the first thing we're going to roll out, it's going to go live in about a month, is what we're calling phonyvendorcheck.com. You can, as a company, any size, you can come to the secure website, log in, sign up, log in, upload your master vendor list, compare it against, you get a real-time feedback, you get a real-time response on, is it anything on that list that looks suspicious? That's the easiest thing that goes up. In about a month and a half to 2 months, we are developing for a QuickBooks apps plugin. We are, so if you use QuickBooks, you already store your vendor list there, you already do make your payments and transactions. It's not that big of a step to now include or activate the Phony Invoice apps. After QuickBooks, we're going to go after the various other financial transaction software. We're going after payment processors. Anywhere there's a transaction, if you're Visa or MasterCard or Federal Reserve, ACH, anywhere where there's a business-to-business transaction, we feel like our data would be valuable. If we can imagine Visa providing a service to all of their small businesses, well, why doesn't Visa check with us before those payments are made to see if those payments should be made? They can go back to their customers and be like, hey, here's a value add that we're doing on behalf of you guys. And of course, data companies like Dun & Bradstreet, Experian, LexisNexis, we believe that our data would be a great value add to theirs. And the last slide, we are done here, and I'm going to pull up my business partner for some QA. So this is,
I'm gonna cut you off.
Yeah.
I'm gonna cut you off. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Let's get to that towards the end,
Okay.
and we'll get to the Q&A so we have time for questions.
All right.
Let's open up the room if you guys have any questions. Thank you. Good job. Good job.
We have a question in the middle here.
Oh, thanks. So this is so needed. I have actually 2 small businesses, and I get solicited all the time by different crazy things, from the Yellow Pages to the United States Trademark Association, and I have some legitimate companies, though, that also do the same thing. So I work in the healthcare consulting business, and we have these textbooks we buy every year, and sometimes we don't buy textbooks. We'll get invoices from textbooks from real companies, and they'll say your renewal notice and your subscription's renewing, and we didn't actually ever subscribe. And then we also just recently had a thing happen, not recently, probably it was been 2 years ago. I was going through my AT&T legitimate phone bill, and there's a charge on there for $30. And I called AT&T, and they said, I don't know, it's a third party who you bought some Yellow Page advertisement. I said, I didn't buy any advertisement. So I called the Missouri Attorney General's office, and they told me they couldn't investigate individual personal problems. And I said, this is not a personal problem. But when I called, then I called the company to ask them about it. They played me back a recording that actually had the person who answers our phone, 21st Century Edge, this is so-and-so, can I help you? They played that back to me, and then they asked that person, what's your address? And the person said their address, and your zip code, and what's your telephone number? And then they asked them a couple of questions, and they said yes. They played this back to me as authentication that I had actually authorized this to be done. They played back a recording. They'd actually called our office and recorded it. It's crazy. Anyway, we got it taken off our bill, but we couldn't get retroactively that we'd gotten charged for 1 month.
So those are great points, and actually the phone bill, the cramming issue that was going on with you there is not something that we currently address, but it gives me some great ideas. So thanks for sharing that story. And you're not alone in terms of the number of people that are getting these kinds of invoices. It's unreal. And when I started my first business, I remember the first time I got one, and I was like, what is this? And it was a Yellow Pages one, and of course I actually at that moment happened to be it was slow enough that I actually read the disclaimer, and I was like, wow, that's a solicitation. So I shredded it. And that's what almost all of us do, is just throw it away. And that's kind of remarkable to me, because we're all just kind of being complacent about the whole thing and letting these scams permeate. They're just going on forever and ever. And these guys have been doing this same thing. I got Yellow Pages invoices 13 years ago. I still get them. It's not illegal. What they're doing is not illegal. I feel like it's deceptive. So what we're trying to do is call attention to people who may have paid this and say, hey, you did buy something, and there is some value. You are listed on a website somewhere. Do you feel like that's worth what you paid for it? And if it is, okay. But we want you to be aware of that. And then there's also the side where it is absolutely a scam. People are stealing money from people, and we're after that.
There's a question up front here.
Do you have a plan for a dispute process from the vendor's point of view?
So we won't be involved in the actual dispute. If we're called to trial or something like that, we will certainly provide whatever evidence we have, absolutely. One of the great things about this business is that there's a revenue generating opportunity for entrepreneurs, ourselves, but there's also an opportunity to save a whole bunch of businesses a whole bunch of money. Somebody's out there driving around on a fancy yacht because all of us aren't paying enough attention to what the bills we're paying. We don't think that's okay.
Another question in the middle.
Jonathan, awesome presentation. I'm mostly interested regarding the API. I want to know how you guys are capturing data and how you come to the point where you determine that it is a scammer or not. Is that something that you guys are all taking care of internally, or are you getting user feedback to build that database, or how are you guys doing that?
I'm going to let Dave answer that, but I will say that's kind of our secret sauce right now. So you're not going to get too much out of us.
Yeah, so there's definitely a human moment where we have to really vet somebody. We're not going to call somebody a scam if they're not really a scam. So if they have been prosecuted, if they have been tried, we're going to flag that. It's going to get extra weight in our system. If they're in a category where we know this goes on over and over again, domain name things, you're going to get some extra weight. Now, again, we're going to be very explicit when we respond to you and say, study this invoice. We're not going to say, this is fraud, study this invoice, give it some extra attention. In terms of data collection, we have a research team that's actually out there using a variety of methods to gather information, everything from as simple as get some Google alerts set up so we can capture the news to much more in-depth practices for going and looking for existing data sources and partnering with companies that have those data sources and aggregating the largest database of fraud that we possibly can.
Question for you here in the back.
I was curious if you guys had any way of a system that I do whenever I discover an invoice is empty, and that is sign them up for as many newsletters as you can possibly get their email into.
At least ours.
Yeah.
If that was something in your model.
We do think about those kinds of things, but we don't actually do that. We do have, and I don't think this has been mentioned yet, you can send an email to us to ifoundaphony@phonyinvoices.com if you get phony. So if you take a picture with your phone, scan it, or if you get an email or something like that, we are crowdsourcing the collection of this data as well. So I know that anybody in this room who's a business owner, you'll get one this month, I promise, and you'll have to pay extra attention to it.
So I have a quick question here on your right. Talk about, it's a very unique team and different seasons of experience on your team, obviously. Talk about a little bit how your team came together and what that looked like for a lot of us that are trying to build teams right now and build that, that dream team of being able to start creating something. What did that look like for you guys?
Sure. Well, Barnett approached me, and I think a fair amount of you know of the Hellsberg Entrepreneurial Mentoring Program. Well, he's a fraud, because he's the only one in the program that had to start a business until this one. So he'd inherited his business. So he came to me and he said, okay, I got to go legit here. You got to help me out. So obviously it was his idea. He's super passionate about it, and he is incredible at opening doors in this community and getting us in front of people, and also an incredible wealth of information as an experienced entrepreneur. So when he approached me, my skill set aligned very well. What we had here was a marketing challenge and a development challenge, and that's what my other current business does. And then between the two of us having a lot of things going on and yet still loving this idea as a business, we needed to go out and find someone that could actually do lots of stuff all the time and be dedicated to it, and went through a pretty lengthy process of looking for the right person, and that led us to Jonathan.
Who I do lots of stuff all the time. Is that what you just said?
That is correct, yes.
So I have a background in digital anti-piracy. I worked out of LA, servicing all the movie studios, record labels, video game companies. So there was actually a good shoe-in in terms of doing anti-piracy and then moving into anti-fraud. So it just kind of came together. The team, it kind of works, right?
It works great, yeah.
Another question up front to your left.
Given some of the dollar amounts that you've talked about, it seems like your model would be conducive for a performance-based pricing approach. How do you capture revenue?
Right now we work on a fixed fee basis, so there's some sort of standard pricing that's out there, and then it varies based on the company and how extensive the testing needs to be. So when we move to a QuickBooks API or something like that, it's going to be a fixed flat monthly fee, but if we're going direct to a client, we're going to look at the complexity of their payment systems. So we have clients that have multi-unit and some of those multi-unit retailers, or in one case grocery, we have to send fake invoices to all of their locations to properly test whether there's weakness at any point. And that's a much more difficult task than one location, with one payables department.
Question way here in the back.
From a marketing perspective and an advocacy perspective, it seems to me like your name is wrong. It should be nophonyinvoices.com. Because your clientele are people who are either suckers or have careless employees. Wouldn't it be stronger to say we're against phony invoices? for people to say, we're advocates, and that way you're training your employees to say, we're for phonyinvoices.com. I think you'll have more buy-in from people. Otherwise, you know, you're sending the wrong message and you're not training your customer base every day on what you're advocating. You wouldn't have a website called cancerfraud.com.
Okay, so that's a very interesting point. I'm going to disagree a little bit. We think there's incredible stopping power with that name. We also think there's incredible stopping power with our image of Phony Phil. We saw that in action when we were at the ACFE conference. We had everybody stopped at our booth because the minute they walked in the door, again, we're in Vegas here, there was a guy with a ski mask on sitting at a computer. That's going to get attention. And we actually considered, should we all wear ski masks at this conference? And nobody wanted to go to jail or get thrown down on the casino floor. So we did not do that. But we had the most attention out of anybody exhibiting at that conference by a long shot. And lots of people coming up saying, what is this? What do you guys do? There's some real stopping power in the way that it's named right now.
And if I can just add to that, it's a great point that you bring up, but from a cold call perspective, we did run into that. You know, you calling someone saying, I'm from Phony Invoices, there's always this, what in the world? And for a while, we actually used PIDC services because we wanted to get away from that. But I found, and we found, over the last 6 to 8 months, that the Phony Invoices, it actually piques interest. And so there's a, you know, tongue-in-cheek kind of joke. Yeah, I'm from Phony Invoices, we actually help you stop paying Phony Invoices. And so far, it's worked really well. So thank you for your comment, though. That's funny.
I want to go ahead and wrap up here. Last question. And you kind of had the slide and I cut you off, so I want you to get back to it. You have a room of definitely 200, maybe almost 300 people here. We'd love to hear what we as a community, and I think this is something that's really powerful about 1 Million Cups, what can we as a community do to support you?
So this is, I really wanted to get to this slide. This is where so after the recent pivot of going towards a database-driven API, we need contacts. We are looking for, even in the payment industry, you know, if you can give us warm handoffs to any of these Western Union, PayPal, MoneyGram, the Federal Reserve Bank, they handle all ACH payments, merchant banks, consumer banks, credit cards, like we are, you know, I've been coming to 1 Million Cups for about 3 or 4 months now, and I love the camaraderie here, the community here, and so this is our just open plea. It's like, if you guys can help us get some warm handshakes, we would really appreciate that.
Great. Good job. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
All right. So while we get our next speaker ready, how about some announcements? What do we have?
Can I give you my
Amanda
microphone?
from Kaufman.
Thank you.
Where are you, Amanda? No, Amanda. To tell us about Top of Mind? All right, well, that really was an announcement. Oh, wait, she's coming around. She's coming around the room when she comes. Dun-dun-dun. She'll be coming around the room when she comes. Bum-ba-da. Thank you for the applause there, Nate. You're always a help. All yours.
Okay. Thanks. Sorry, it's hard to do live stream and get up here at the same time. I'm Amanda Sneeders with the entrepreneurship team at Kaufman, and I just want to give you guys a little heads up on the little cards that you probably saw on your seats today. Our VP of entrepreneurship, Tom Rue, and I created a web series called Top of Mind, and basically it's news and entrepreneurship, tips and advice for startups, as well as interviews with actual entrepreneurs and startups. So we are looking for some feedback on this web series. So the little cards you have a QR code that connects to a survey, and we'd really just like some advice, what you like, what you don't like, what we can change, how we can better kind of feed the entrepreneurial ecosystem here. So here's the website if you don't have a QR scanner, or if you have one of the little cards, it'll take you directly to the survey, and it has a couple of videos that you can watch, and then some questions on how you can give us proper feedback. So if you guys could do that, that would be great. Thank you. Oh, sorry, it was with the Phony Invoices paperwork. Thank you. Yes, it looks like that. So it's a small little card, has top of mind, picture of Tom Rue, and there's a QR code on it. There's also some back by the coffee if you didn't get one on your chair. So, thanks.
Thank you, Amanda. Melissa, put down that laptop. All right, a quick announcement from Melissa.
Hi guys, just a couple of quick announcements about things that are happening in Kansas City this week. We've always got a lot of great events going on in addition to 1 Million Cups. So tomorrow night at 6 p.m., a new group called Kansas City Women in Tech is launching, and their kickoff party is going to be at VML, just north of the river at the old municipal airport. And then one other thing is that the KC Fringe Festival, which is really a collection of startup artists and, yeah. So that is going on through the 28th here in Kansas City. There's hundreds, literally hundreds of shows and performers, including Laura Packer, who has a show of her own. So make sure to get out and support some startup artists as well. Thanks.
Thank you, Melissa. All right, next we have Nate Allen. Nate, come tell us about the Pendergast. Huh? What?
Hey everybody, I'm Nate Allen, founder of Data Communication Studio, 4 first names. But I'm here to waste your time with an announcement about the Pendergast machine. So we are opening a new co-working space. It's at 1624 Westport Road. That is 2 blocks east of the fiber space on Westport Road. We are gonna do a tour for the public right after 1 Million Cups today at what's scheduled at 10:30 and gives you a little bit of time to get out of here and get over there. But we're just gonna walk you through the space, talk about what we're offering, talk about some of the pricing. This is a community-run thing, and in order to get off the ground, we need a lot of interest and a lot of buy-in from the community. So if you are interested in learning about the co-working space, or even better, interested in working out of the co-working space, stop by it. It's again 1624 Westport Road at 10:30 today. Thanks a lot, guys.
Thank you, Nate. Also, don't forget to go to dreambig.us to help entrepreneurs across the country. What other announcement did I have? Oh, here's an interesting one. Because we're at a new record capacity crowd, 330 of you. That's not bad. And here we thought you'd all take summer vacation and not show up till September, so that's good. But we do have a little extra overflow room in the plaza room, so if you want to rest your feet, head on over there if you wish. So, on to our next presenter. Are we all ready? We are all ready. Okay, so 3D printing, fab stuff, it's really cool technology. It's gonna be revolutionary. You know, in another 20 years, we're gonna be just, you know, making stuff right in our living rooms, like a microwave or something, right? Today, actually. We could do that now. So if I need a new pair of shoes, I'm just gonna print those babies out. So our next presenter, Ron Light, is with Sedgwick3D, and he's got a really cool, interesting take on 3D printing. And he's got some models up here. I've taken a look at them. Really, really finely detailed, really, really amazing stuff, and they're doing it at a price point, apparently, that you really can't get that stuff. So please welcome Ron Light from Sedgwick3D.
Thank you. 3 years ago, the University of Illinois published a lab experiment to create three-dimensional parts. Actually, they published it earlier. That's when I found out about it 3 years ago. I was mesmerized. They take a liquid, and where light shines, it turns hard. So if you can programmatically tell it where to shine the light, you can create a shape from that resin, and layer by layer. Their lab setup was quite complex, very manually intensive. You start with a vat of resin. You can barely see it over there on the right. It's a beaker, about 50 milliliters of resin. It has an aluminum platform that moves up and down with a thumb screw, so every time they move the platform, they have to adjust it. There's a mirror to reflect the image down into the resin. There's a lens to focus the projector into the beaker. When a projector is normally projecting it, it's designed to shine up on a wall. Well, we have to use a lens to focus it down into the little beaker. And then finally, the projector there is what actually cures the resin. There's enough ultraviolet light coming out of that projector to turn that liquid resin into solid. The type of resin in there is ultravioletly cured resin. So we're probably not even using 90% of, or we're probably using less than 10% of the output of the actual projector to cure the resin. The last thing is the computer. They have to have a program that goes through and shines, that tells the projector what to shine and what to cure. They had a PowerPoint presentation set up, and then the guy would sit there and he'd flip through each slide, and so he'd count for 3 seconds, he'd shine one slide, then he'd flip to the next slide, it would turn black, then he'd have to manually adjust the platform. To create those slides, they'd have to come up with a three-dimensional model or some type of formula to create the object they wanted to create. They would load it up into Mathematica. From there, they'd tell it how high they want the layers, and then they would export images for each layer. This was the resulting part from it. As you can see, the different layers. At the very bottom, it would be kind of a circle, and then as it moves up, the different shape for that layer is shown, and the resin hardens. So my first step was to recreate this experiment. I took the exact same chemicals they were using, my own projector. I pulled a projector out of my basement, got some 2x4s, kind of hacked this thing together. This was my first print down at the Hackerspace, CCCKC, or Hammerspace, where I was putting this together. So this is my first setup here. My whole goal was to automate the process and to say, well, you know, come up with better software that would slice it up for you so you don't have to have Mathematica, which can be expensive. I wanted a platform that was automatic, that the computer would control. So this is my first stab at it. We've got an aluminum platform down here, the same beaker, same lab setup, if you will. Nothing's really connected. It's all floating around, so it's a real pain to try and adjust this every single time. But I've got the platform running, and I've got my software that will take the file and determine that image that needs to shine for each layer. Here's an example. I chose a cathedral model that one of our local makers, Michael Curry, designed. It was probably one of the most complex parts I probably could have started with. But it worked. You can see where it's shining. That's the part that becomes hard. And so once that layer is cured, the platform moves down. In this case, I was printing at 0.2 millimeters. I now print at 0.1 millimeter, which is pretty small. So that layer cures, then it moves down and prints the next layer. When this stuff is curing and hardening, it looks like ice freezing in water. So it's kind of hard to see on a picture. But once it was done, I pulled it out, and it looks kind of like a melted jelly bean there, but once I rinsed it off, it does look better. So once that was working, then I wanted to streamline the process, or streamline the actual frame itself. I started with a projector that was the highest resolution, highest power output for the lowest price that I could find. So I settled on this one, $300 if you find it on sale. Then I literally built the printer around that. Created a frame to go with that. The optics are mounted in here. The vat of resin goes in here, the aluminum platform. Just started modifying this, and I keep tweaking it. I can't ever get to the point where I want to actually mass produce it because I keep tweaking it. The last part was the software, automating the software. So instead of having this real manual process of having a mathematical model and then this expensive software slice it up, I wrote custom software. You pull in your three-dimensional file. Most CAD programs will export to an STL. This will import that STL. You can kind of see a red image in the center. Maybe you can. One cool feature about this is the red image does not cure the resin. So I can shine it onto the top layer of the resin, focus it, get it scaled and adjusted, and then start printing. So I pull in the file. At this point, I've got the projector turned on. The vat of resin's in there. I can see that I can adjust it to get it scaled properly. I can position it in the center, and then I slice it up. And on the left-hand side, I have each layer I can preview that's got the image that needs to be shown once it's time to solidify that layer. Here I am focusing the projector. That's kind of my print area. I chose the top-down process because it's mechanically simpler. Here I've got a platform that gets lowered into the resin as each layer cures. Other printers out there will do from the bottom up. They've got a clear platform, and they shine the image up through that platform and then pull the object out. It's mechanically more complex because when you solidify that layer of resin, one, it cannot stick to that layer. You have to remove it from that glass somehow. And then two, even if it doesn't stick to it, you still have a vacuum if you have a large part. So I chose this method. It was also one of the first methods in terms of commercial production. So patents are less of an issue because they've expired. Once it's all set up and scaled and centered, I click print, and then the image switches from red to white. The white will then cure the resin. I could also just simply shine blue, and the blue would cure it as well. There's a color wheel in the projector, and by shining white, it doesn't use one of those filters, and so I want to get as much ultraviolet light out as possible. LCD projectors don't work as well. The LCD filters the light, so when a blue is shown, it's filtering only the blue through, and it blocks out the ultraviolet light. So that's why I chose DLP. That's the DLP part of the printer. That's just the projector type. So I've got a print started here. Here are some of the objects I've created. The detail has been really astounding. I currently do sell kits and the printer itself, and I advertise 0.1 millimeter resolution. I have gone as low as 0.08 millimeters and 0.05 millimeters. What I start battling is the resin itself. The surface tension of the resin is what creates the next layer for what's cured. And so if I'm printing at 0.05 millimeters, I have to be able to create a layer of resin below the surface and above the part that was just cured. And so that's the challenge there, is keeping that about right. Wrap up here. So I am currently selling kits and fully assembled printers and trying to display it whenever I can at events like Maker Faire and things like this, I guess. So.
Great stuff. There we go. Thank you, Ron. All right, I didn't want to cut you off, but we're at 6 minutes, and I know a lot of people are going to have questions on this. So, questions. There we go.
Can you give an idea of the cost for a part like that in resin?
Here, if I was to compare it to other printers like the filament printers, the cost for the part, pound for pound, is about 3 times as expensive. So where it might be, 10 cents to print a part that big. By the way, that cathedral is about that big. So a part about this big, maybe 30 cents or 75 cents, as opposed to a filament printer where a part that big might be 10 cents of material. However, we have a lot resolution, and there's no way a filament printer could even come close to printing something that small and that detailed.
Another question to your right up front here.
Right side of the stage. Hey. So I really like that this is all off-the-shelf parts right now, but what needs to happen before you could throw an ultraviolet bulb, like crack open the projector, put an ultraviolet bulb where there's a, whatever they're using, halogen probably, and how much of a benefit do you think that would actually be?
One of the big things I did was chose this printer, I'm sorry. One of the advantages of this projector is that I don't have to modify it to use it. Other printers out there like this style have you crack open the projector and adjust the optics inside and or remove color wheels, and they mess with it. They void the warranty. Every bulb in these projectors are all proprietary. Nobody has the same bulb. As you know, if you try to find a replacement, you have to go to the manufacturer and buy that specific bulb. So it's hard enough finding bulbs in general, let alone an ultraviolet bulb. The other side of that is the resin is formulated to be highly reactive to light. So the little bit of output in here is sufficient to cure it. And so if I found kind of a balance there already, if I went with a higher ultraviolet light output, I'd have to reformulate the resin, which I could do easy enough, but I just found a kind of a balance that works well.
Question here in the middle. I just want to say great job developing this. This is really, really cool. And I know from experience that the commercial grade printers are about $600,000 for this type of technology. So what's your price point on a fully assembled unit? And how big do you plan on scaling these up? How big can you go with that projector?
The challenge with scaling is the projector itself. For every pixel you well out there, or every unit of resolution you want on your part, you have to have a pixel in your projector for that. So this is 1024 by 768. I scale it to 10 pixels per millimeter to get the 0.1 millimeter resolution. So if I want to go with a higher resolution part, I need a projector with higher resolution, and or if I want to go with a bigger part, I need a projector with higher resolution as well, and then to keep the 0.1 millimeters. I currently sell this in both kit form and printer form. The kit is $650, and that includes $650, and that includes 1 liter of resin. The fully assembled printer is $14.95, and that also includes 1 liter of resin.
Question out here in the hallway to your 10 o'clock. There you go.
Being this disposable society that we live in, what's the biodegradability of the resin that you use after it's cured?
I don't exactly know. What you have is essentially an acrylic when it's done. So I don't know the biodegradability of that.
Okay, question over here on your right. Your right.
Hi, this is really cool. Could you tell us about the process that you use to develop a formula for this project and how you modify it each time you want to create a different depth?
Sure. There are lots of ultraviolet cured products out there, like Loctite has some ultraviolet cured Loctite. There's a resin out there called Solar Res that is really thick resin for making for fiberglass work. The problem is those are all very thick, and those would work in a bottom-up process, or they have the potential to work, but in the top-down process, I need a really thin resin. So I worked with someone to develop this resin. I started with the formula that the University of Illinois published, and then I worked with a gentleman to develop it, to get it thinner and to get it to cure harder. Sorry, the second part was formulating it for what now? Modify the formula. It's just a balance of how well did I can modify the formula to affect curing time. So if I want it to cure quickly, I can make it more sensitive. It does tend to warp more if you do that. One of the problems with turning a liquid into a solid is it becomes more dense by shrinking. And so if it cures too quickly, or if I cure it too much, the part will tend to warp.
Another question to your left.
This is fascinating. How long does it take for you to create something like this? So how long does it take to enter in the information for that, and then how long does it take to print?
In this case, I downloaded a three-dimensional file of the cathedral itself, so I didn't have to do anything there. Load it into the program, scale it, slice it up. That may take a few minutes. And then the printing process, depending on the part, because if I have a really thin-walled part, I might be able to print it faster than a really thick part. Each layer takes anywhere from 6 to 8 seconds to cure. Then I move the platform, let the resin settle out. That may take another 2 to 4 seconds. So a print like this, something that's, say, 1.5 inches or 2 inches tall, might take 1.5 hours or 2 hours.
Another question out here in the hallway.
Who's your customer that you're selling to now, and how are you reaching them?
Right now, I've got it listed on my website, and that's about it. But there's been like 3 main areas that I've seen people using it for. One is printing out game figures. Another one is creating model parts for like HO trains and jewelry. That seems to be another big one. So from all the businesses, the jewelry one is kind of an interesting one that I'm pursuing.
Question in the middle.
Yeah, did you in-license this technology from the University of Illinois, and what kind of barriers to entry are you presenting to other companies?
The patents on this are well over 30 years old. So the early ones into this, they're expired. The university, they did publish it online. I did talk to Joe Muskin. He was one of the guys that developed it. He didn't see any issue with it. He said he'd officially checked with the university. They never got back with me. But I'm not using their formula. And everything else there, like, say, DLP technology, well, that's built into the projector itself. So as long as I'm buying a licensed projector, that shouldn't be an issue. So from that standpoint, I don't have any licensing that I am paying for, essentially.
Question back here next to the camera.
I don't recall if you said it or not, but what's the envelope size? How big can you print?
Currently, it's set up at about 3 inches by 3 inches by 4.5 inches. Yes.
Another question in the middle.
Have you figured out how to print in multiple colors?
No, I have not. The resin, I've only got this nasty orange for one main reason. The dye does not settle out. Since it's a monomer, it's kind of like dealing with oil, essentially, and pigments and dyes tend to settle out of oils. This is the only dye I have found that nicely binds to essentially the monomer and does not settle out. Other companies out there selling colored resins may settle out. So,
Another question here in the middle.
Can you differentiate your product from 3D systems?
Price is a big one, but also mine is not a professional unit. I can get great prints, in my opinion, but they are going to be able to come out with printers that do 25 microns and 50 microns, and I print regularly at 100 microns. So they're going to cost more, the resin's going to cost more, but they will provide a higher resolution part than this.
Have you sold, a real quick question, where are you at in the life cycle of actually getting this product built, and how many, have you sold any units yet, or how far are you into actually producing this for other people?
Sure, I've been working on it for about 3 years. Ever since I saw that, I started shortly after that. This model, as you see it now, has been around for about a year, and I have sold kits and do have people out and fully assembled printers. If I was just to guess, I'd say 30 or 40 are out there. And I have seen print results from them as well, so that's kind of exciting.
Hey, Ron, I've got a question for you real quick. What's your background? Math, physics, stonemason?
Computer programmer.
Computer programmer, okay. Thanks.
Other questions?
Ron, how big could this idea become? I mean, the idea of additive manufacturing, 3D printing, is fascinating, and it's interesting to talk to different makers and people that are working on a small scale, about what the future of this technology, could bring. So what excites you about your current product and what you're doing, and how big could this become?
I think what's really exciting about this is the ability to, one, design my own parts. I love making things. I just happen to be making the printer out of it. But everybody likes to make things, whether it's jewelry or little fixtures for solving a problem. So that's very exciting. That, I think, is kind of the draw that pulls people into it. From the printer standpoint, I think we are where laser printers were 20 years ago. I think in 10 or 20 years, we'll see that everybody has some form of a 3D printer in their home. So it's very exciting.
Question here in the third row.
Quick question. From the 30 or 40 you may have out there, have you seen, as far as for the materials, et cetera, the revenue flow as an ongoing revenue source? And do you have an estimate of how much people are using it and how much you can sell in that regard as well?
I don't know how much they're actually printing. I've also had people buy my resin to use in other printers. I'm not selling it for that purpose. And I have a lot of international stuff. I would say over half my orders are international. So like I said, a lot of people are just hobbyists like me that are willing to put some time into a printer and fiddle with it a little bit. I don't know if I'm quite to the go fully commercial yet and start marketing it to businesses. I keep finding things I want to adjust on it. And that's part of the problem is when is it going to be good enough to finally go to the next level? So,
a question up here in the front.
I can tell you're a very technical guy, and I see you have a lot of passion for this. But one thing, and I'm also that same way when I build my products, and I'm a software developer. However, consumers, they tend to appreciate a lot more simplicity. Have you considered modifying your software so that it's a whole lot easier to use and understand? Like, I would enjoy all those interesting coordinates and understand what's happening, but as a consumer, I'd like to see a pretty picture and hit print. Have you considered moving towards that path for wider adaptation?
there are a lot of settings on my program, and that may just be something for me to fiddle with and say, well, scale it this way, scale it that way. And maybe we'll get to a point where, hey, I've noticed this setting is always in the same spot. Let's get it out of there, But for now, still targeting the hobbyist market, and they want to adjust everything. They want to fiddle with it and reprogram it and stuff like that. So at the moment, no.
A question over here.
Of the kits that you have out there, do you know if any of them are using it to work with their kids to make their own toys? As a parent of young children, I could see this being fascinating for my kids to actually make their own toys.
I don't know anybody that's using my printer to create toys for kids. It is an acrylic, so it should be safe. I'm not saying that anybody should use it for food, things like that, but obviously there are hazards with people making small parts for kids, so I'm not marketing it that direction. But like I said, I know one guy for sure has used it for creating scale figures for his HO model railroad and creates his own custom figures for that. So,
right here in the front row.
Is it possible to invert the design so that what you're producing would be like a mold for, say, like candy production, people who want to make their own custom candy molds or anything like that?
Since you're starting with a three-dimensional file, all you'd have to do is have your software basically create the mold around it. So as long as you have the three-dimensional file that is the mold, then yes. However, I would not suggest using this plastic for food.
All right, Ron, I think we're going to give you the last word. No more questions. You got capacity crowd here. What do you want to leave them with?
Okay. Besides the standard, go tell everybody about me, I do want feedback in two areas. And the first one is the case, just the setup of the printer itself. When I designed this, my goal was to make it as cheap as possible and while maintaining the results. I've had a lot of pushback saying, hey, well, if you make an aluminum frame, I'll buy it. Well, that'll add $300 to $500 to the cost of the printer. And so I have avoided going down that road because I'm a cheapskate and I want to provide this to cheapskates. So do I need to stop being a cheapskate and create something more professional that more people would adopt? The second thing is moving forward. At some point, once I think that I'm settled into good design here, I'm going to want to move forward. And I've been looking at Kickstarter. I think that's probably the best route to go. So if anybody has any feedback, any experiences with Kickstarter, or any other crowdfunding sources like that, I'd be interested to hear about that. So.
Very good. Thank you, Ron.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for spending another Wednesday morning with us. We'll see you next week.